guest speaker and guest minister this morning is the 2011 Best Spiritual Author, winner of the Best Spiritual Author competition in 2011. She is an inspiring, respected Unity minister and spiritual teacher. Her message about our spiritual identities inspires people across cultures and faith traditions to meet life circumstances with spiritual maturity. She is the senior minister at the Unity Church of San Antonio, Texas, and a mentor for emerging leaders in New Thought. Please give a warm welcome to Reverend Linda Martella-Whitsett.
Orange is my favorite color, the color of zeal. So I'm in the right place, and so are you today, huh? It's a joy to be here. In fact, I've connected with so many of you over the last 24 hours. I feel right at home here, and I thank you for your warm welcome. It reminds me of the first time that I came to a Unity church. Every time I step into one for the first time, I'm taken back to that time when I stepped into a Unity church in Omaha, Nebraska many years ago. I sat down in an ocean of unfamiliar faces, as those of you who are here for the first time are experiencing today. I remember the very first message that I received after the opening song was this timeless, in Unity anyway, a timeless message that says, there is only one presence, one power, and that is God, and God is good. I started to cry. Something deep inside really connected to that as truth, and I felt moved. And I continued to be moved throughout the whole service. I felt a little embarrassed about it. How about you, if you've done this? Then the minister went on to say something about our divine nature, that because we're made in the image and likeness of God, what that means is that if God is good, it means that that's our nature as well. Again, I just was so moved to tears by that. How many of you, when you stepped into Unity for the first time, the second time, third time, found yourself really filled with emotion about it? Yeah, so many. And so many still do this to this day and tell me about it. So I've wondered about that. I've wondered, why is that? Why do we feel such an important emotional connection to these ideas? And there can only be one explanation for it, as I've come to understand it, and that is because it is our nature. That we know it because we recognize it as true. And therefore it sort of resonates with us in a way that nothing else does. Do you know what I'm saying? Do you feel that way? So there has to be something about who we are that can receive that message and experience it as the truth for us. It can't be something outside of us. It has to be what we are in order for that to be such a powerful truth that awakens that awareness in us. Now, Unity didn't make it up. These messages of our divine identity were given to us long before. Jesus spoke of it when he was quoting the scriptures that he was raised on, the Hebrew scriptures. When he said, let me tell you something, guys, you are divine. Okay, he didn't say it quite that way. At least we don't read the translation of it that way, do we? He said, verily I say to thee, you are God's sons and daughters of the Most High, every one of you. That was his message. He was saying, come on, guys, you are divine. You are divine. Wake up to that. If you read the Buddhist scriptures, the Dhammapada, it says very clearly, every being has the Buddha nature. Well, that sounds like the same idea, doesn't it? The same message. And then you go back to Hinduism, scriptures, a plethora of scriptures that say over and over again the message, the self with a capital S is not separate from you. So these messages are those that people who have gone within and who have discerned truth all through the ages have come to these same conclusions. We are divine. Well, that's a very different message than the one I was given when I was growing up. How about you? How many of you were raised in a much different discipline? One that told you that instead you inherited the sin gene, right? That you were born in sin. And now, this wasn't their fault. I mean, it's what Christianity taught us to believe. And so, you know, I was told that through no fault of my own, I was condemned on the way out of the birth canal. And it just seemed ridiculous to me from a very young age. It didn't make sense. Well, how come? That's not fair. You know, maybe I can misbehave and get punished, you know, for my own actions, but that just doesn't seem fair. What kind of God is that? You know, it didn't make sense to my little mind. And to my growing mind, it continued to not make sense until I just pondered that. And, you know, Christianity, the traditional Christianity and orthodoxy today, really has that strong message today about our sinful nature. But unity has been teaching this great truth that that is just not the case. That the fact is just the opposite. That we are born, we are made whole. We're born in the wholeness of our divine nature. Which means that all that God is, we are capable of being, of demonstrating into life. And Jesus told us that we are the light of the world, and that's what we are to do. So I've come to decide that I should take that seriously and start to really work with that as a principle in my life, that I will stop questioning and just start experiencing how to do that, you know. I know that the principles of traditional Christianity speak to this sinful nature, but how many of you have ever been present at the birth or just after the birth of a newborn? Human newborn. I mean, any newborn, but human newborn. All right, so many. Did you ever hear anybody take up that little bundle and look at it with kind, loving eyes and start to think about it and say, well, that's just another little sinner born today? Anybody? I've never heard a soul who actually believes it. Nobody believes that. When we look at the perfection of life, when we see the demonstration of divine life in this new bundle of potential, what do we see? We see only what's right. We see only goodness there. Correct? Only goodness there. So, you know, no matter what we say we believe theologically, when it comes right down to it, we see rightly and we discern rightly when we see good, when we see that good nature, and that's what's there. So for me, I've come to ask this question of myself. Okay, so I'm divine. That's nice. Why am I not always acting like it? Isn't that a fair question? Well, I don't know about you, but I am not always acting like it. Sorry to say that, but it's the truth. Sometimes I feel like an only human, you know, and I express that way. So it's a question, it's a quiz, it's a quizzical thing for me. I don't understand sometimes why it can be a challenge to take on that nature. Charles Fillmore said, however you can describe God, you must be able to begin to describe yourself that way, because that's our true nature. So for me, I say, okay, well, how come I'm not doing that all the time, even with all that I know? You know, I figure when I became a minister, I'd get spiritual enough that I'd always be divine. You know, I'd always act the part. Yeah, right. I mean, it's a discipline every day to live into and up to the nature of the divine identity, right? That's our job, I think, on planet Earth, is to learn how to do that. So I just came up with this thought that, well, there was a time I didn't know it about myself, right? There was a time I didn't know. And so if we never knew, then we couldn't consciously express our true nature. So there's this little story about a man in an small little African village who had a farm. He went out one morning, out to the cliffs, high up in the cliffs, the eagles had their nests. Well, he found an eaglet, a little baby, on the ground all by itself. It apparently had fallen and gotten separated from its tribe, right? So the farmer, in his compassion, picked up that little eaglet, took it back to his place, looked around and said, where am I going to put it? So he wanted it to be safe, so he stuck it in the chicken coop, because there it could be protected. As he observed day after day, working with the chickens and looking at this little eaglet, pretty soon the little eaglet was eating all the chicken feed, and it started waddling like a chicken, and it even started making little sounds like a chicken makes. Kind of odd for a little eaglet. The farmer's friend came to see him and said, what's that in the chicken coop? The farmer, by that time, was convinced. He said, well, it's a chicken. His friend said, that ain't no chicken. His friend was so disturbed by it that he had to find a way to try to teach that little eaglet what its true nature really was. So it came by one day, the farmer's friend came by, plucked it out of the chicken coop, went up onto the rooftop, and held his hand out and let the little eaglet stand right there on the edge of his palm, and he talked to him. He said, you weren't born to be a chicken, to kind of hang around in the coop all day and eat chicken food and waddle. You were made an eagle. You were supposed to fly. Fly, eagle, fly. The baby just turned back around, looked down, said, that's a far way down. Turned back around, came right back up the little arm, and got off that rooftop as fast as it could. It just didn't see it in itself at all. Back into the chicken coop it went. The farmer's friend, however, was frustrated. He knew that this little eaglet just needed to wake up to its true nature. So he went one morning in a stealth way before dawn, and he plucked up the little eaglet, and he went all the way back out to the cliffs. Because he thought, well, if he sees what eagles do, maybe he'd connect with that. Climbed up with the little eagle up as close to the Aries as he could get. And in that early morning air, he could watch the eagles coming out from their nests and soaring out into the sky around him. So again, the farmer's friend held the baby eagle out into this and pointed and said, see, you weren't meant to hang out with the chickens and waddle like a chicken and eat chicken feed. You were meant to fly, fly, eagle, fly. Well, all of a sudden, the little feathers of that eaglet started twitching. And as the eagle was observing the other eagles, just all of a sudden the connection was made. And like me coming home into a Unity church, something came alive in that baby, and that eagle just got it. Wings opened, took off, and the farmer's friend in his ecstasy was saying, you did it, see, you were never meant to hang out with the chickens. You're an eagle, fly, man. One of my favorite moments in movie history of all time, at least up till now, is a moment in Dead Man Walking, that movie about the young man who was on death row. As many of you might have seen it. Sister Helen Pergian walked the journey with this young convict up until the day that he was to die. So on that last morning, sitting in his cell with him, Sister Pergian was, being with him in those hours before he was to walk down the hall to his death. Matthew says to Sister Pergian, I know I'm a condemned man for what I did to those children, but even so, sister, I've got to tell you that I prayed for those 2 kids that I killed. Sister looked at him. She put her hands on his shoulders. And she said, Matthew Poncelat, you are a child of God. God loves you, and I love you. He started to cry. And through his tears, he whispered to her, nobody told me. When I think about it, it just gives me the chills, because I often wonder how many Matthew Poncelats are sitting in our prisons today, and of the prisons of their own making, So our nature is divine, but we haven't always known it. But guess what? I don't have that excuse anymore. And frankly, neither do you. You know better, so we can't use that. So what else is it that keeps me from expressing my divine identity in the world all the time? I think it's just that I forget. I think I just get consumed by the world around me. I get too busy to be paying attention. How about you? I get distracted by, as the Sufis call it, the 100,000 veils of illusion that separate me from me. I think we do this because we have this dual capacity. We can look to the world for our information, and it's so compelling, isn't it? And the more technology we had, the very technology that was supposed to make our life easier, right? The very things are consuming our attention now, and so it's just very easy to not consider who we really are and to be conscious in the way we express then in our words, thoughts, and actions. So for me, I think the business of unity and why it's so beautiful to have a unity community to attend is that that's what we're about in unity. Our business is remembering. Our work is remembering. And in all the things we do, from a celebration on a Sunday morning, to the studies and the classes and the workshops that we offer, to the service that we give to one another in community and out into the world, all of those things are designed for us to live at the height of our awareness that we are divine, and then to bring that awareness into everything and in toward everyone that we interact with. And so the unity community is uniquely designed to allow us to remember. Now, my children were raised in unity, and my son, when he was in middle school, gave me one of the greatest moments of appreciation for the good of what unity can do in the business of remembering. My children are multicultural children. My husband is of African descent. We were living at the time in a community that was pretty non-diverse, and the school that their children were attending was non-diverse. My son in the 7th grade, who could best be described, I think the kindest description would be, he was a restless student. Well, one day he was sitting in class, he dropped his pencil. He leaned down to pick up his pencil, and a boy in the desk next to him leaned down next to him and whispered very loudly, "Just like an N to drop your pencil in class." You know the N word. My son was startled. It wasn't something we were accustomed to hearing, hadn't happened before. He didn't know what to do, but he came home and he told me and his dad. And over the dinner table, I asked him, "What would you like to do about that, Adrian?" He said, "I want to talk to that kid." I said, "That sounds like it might be a good idea." The next day, Adrian went to the school counselor, told her the story, and wisely she asked him, "Adrian, what do you want to do about it?" And he repeated, "I'd like to talk to that kid." The counselor invited this boy into the room, and together the three of them sat, and I wish I could have been there or just listened in. I had no idea what was said, but those two boys came out as best friends from that room. And they remained friends all through the rest of their years in school together. Now, that could only happen if my son did not feel diminished by someone else's insult. If he knew that his being was intact and he knew his divine nature enough that nothing could throw him from that. And not only that, but that by claiming that nature and knowing knowing who he was, that he could actually teach and affect another person who had obviously heard, been taught himself how to be a racist, but could learn another path from someone who could demonstrate divine love in the face of fear and judgment. Is that powerful? And this is the potential of unity in our lives, that we can really reclaim our divine nature, know who we are, that nothing can throw us and no one can take us off the journey of our own true nature. So what I'd like to do is to devote a few minutes, if you would, with me, to a time of meditation where we can be in touch with that nature within us. So will you do that? Will you sit back and just in your own way begin to relax, close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and let the message of this music set the tone for our meditation. One of my favorite moments in movie history, at least to this day, is a scene in Dead Man Walking. How many of you have seen the film Dead Man Walking? It's about a young man, Matthew Poncelot, who was convicted of murdering 2 children. and was on death row and about to be executed. Sister Helen Pergian sat with him on that final day. She had walked with him through his trial and conviction and the whole journey. She sat with him, and Matthew confessed to her. He said, I know I'm a condemned man. I know I'm going to hell for what I did. But even so, sister, I prayed for those 2 children that I murdered. Sister looked at him. She put her hands on his shoulders, and she said to him, Matthew Poncelat, you are a child of God. God loves you, and I love you. Matthew started to cry. He said, nobody told me. So just imagine how many Matthew Poncelats are walking around in our world today, in our prisons or in a prison of their own making, not knowing that they were born divine. See, I believe that that's one of the biggest reasons why we don't always show it. But guess what? I don't have that excuse anymore. I've learned too much. And how about you? You're sitting here, so sorry. It's no excuse. We can't use that excuse that we don't know, because we are learning this about ourselves every day more and more. So why else would we not be demonstrating our true nature? I think it's just this simple. I think we forget. I think we get distracted by what the Sufis say are the 100,000 veils of illusion that are separating us from us. You see, that we're so busy. I like to say I'm awfully busy, you know. I'm busy doing my work. I'm busy bringing home the bacon, and somebody else in my house is busy cooking the bacon. Let me just say that. You know, I'm busy. I've got things to do. I've got my mind turned to all this technology that was supposed to make our life easier, right? And how about you? You know, we get distracted from this idea of living intentionally as the light of God. And yet, when we decide, when we choose it, it is the most powerful thing for us. And we can truly express that nature in the world and make a difference wherever we are. Whatever circumstance we're in, we can improve what is going on. Do you believe that? Have you experienced that for yourself? Yeah. Now, in unity, I believe unity is perfectly poised as a kind of community in which you can learn to remember. We practice remembering here. I think the whole business of unity is remembering. So through the Sunday experience here, as we celebrate together, as we study together and serve together, we are in the business of remembering our true nature and bringing it to bear in the very things that we are doing together in community. And those of you who've hung around this community long enough, you experience that, and that's why you keep coming back, because this is the practice ground, right? It's the playing field for us. Now, you know, when you've been in unity a long time, you really start to live this. My children were raised in unity, my son and my daughter, who are both now adults. And I spoke about my son in the first service. I want to tell on my daughter in this service, because when she was living in Chicago just a handful of years ago, when she was in her mid-20s, she called me one night in tears. And that wasn't entirely unusual for her. She had a lot of emotions going on. But she called me and said, Mom, I'm watching this show on television. It's the show called What Would You Do? Have you seen this show? They set up situations where actors are doing some unconscionable things, and then they observe whether people respond or not. So Alicia's watching the show. She said, Mom, they had these actors that were beating up a homeless man, who was also an actor, by the way, on the street, and then observing and asking, figuring out what would people do if they would walk by or do something. And she's sobbing on the phone trying to tell me this. And I said, honey, what's going on? Why are you so upset about this? I don't know how I would answer that question. She was so upset because in her heart, as she was observing this scene, she was saying, I would want to do something. I would want to intervene. I would want to stop it, and I would want to make things better. But I'm afraid I would be too chicken. I'm afraid I'd be a chicken running around in the chicken coop, I'd be afraid I wouldn't be able to do that. And that bothers me, that I wouldn't be able to do it. Now, mind you, the actors were huge bullies, right? And so anybody would be intimidated by them, wouldn't you imagine? But she was struggling with that question inside of herself. Am I an only human, or am I divine? And what can I bring to a situation in life? The next night, I kid you not, she called me again. And she said, Mom, I got to answer the question today. Literally, she got up the next morning and got on the bus line to take her to the school where she was working with children with autism. She had 2 buses to take, so she was in between bus rides, right in front of a junior high or middle school building. And right there, as she was waiting for the second bus, a group of middle school kids were hanging around and they were talking. And she could hear that their talking became more and more violent within the minutes that she stood there. And at one point, all these big, scary boys turned around to one of the other boys and started pummeling him, started beating him. Alicia didn't hesitate a bit. Now, she's just a little taller than me. She ran over to these big, tall boys, right? And she's looking up at them and she's saying, shouting at the top of her lungs, you stop it! And she's trying to pull them apart. I mean, she couldn't no more physically do that than I could, you know. Pulling them apart, saying, you stop it, leave that boy alone. You got right in the middle of this thing. And the big bully who started it looked down at her and stopped and looked at her like, are you crazy? Do you know you could get hurt? But in her wisdom, in that moment, Alicia stared him off. She looked right into his eyes and kept them there until the boy lowered his and walked away. The whole thing was over. Her bus came. She was so happy about that. She got on the bus, she arrived at school, and she dropped in a puddle on the floor in front of all her colleagues, who all told her, you were absolutely crazy to get in the middle of that. But Alicia felt valiantly ratified. She knew who she was, and that's why she was calling the next night. She says, I know it, I did it. I didn't even think about my own well-being. I just did what needed to be done. And you could feel that she connected with her own true nature and brought it to bear in the middle of a difficult situation and faced off a big bully in the meantime and had him learn something in that moment. That's the power of our true nature at work. And when we study and study enough and we work at it enough and we allow ourselves to open to this greatness that is within us, then more and more we can affect the world in a positive way, courageously, valiantly, living our divine identity. Isn't that exciting? Isn't that where we want to be? Well, there's one more pathway, in fact, the most important pathway for us to realize our divine identity, and that's through going into the silence, as Charles Fillmore called it, into meditation. That's the most significant way. You know, Ram Dass's teacher said to him, you could just go visit a master, but you might as well just be one. You know, you could visit one, but how about just be one? And so that's what we're going to do in this moment. We're going to experience our true nature in some dimension of that in a few minutes of inner work. So listen to this beautiful music, or I guess you're going to sing along with this music, and begin to relax into your true nature right now.
Please join me in singing When I Pray. When I pray, I feel my heart go deeper, my heart go deeper into my God. When I pray, I feel my heart go deeper, my
ourselves to this time of deep prayer and reflection, to really be in touch with the truth of who we are, to realize the empowerment of our divine nature is built in. Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, identified many of the qualities of God that are our qualities and that have resonance as energy right within our own body temple. So for a moment, draw your attention to your solar plexus and just below it and behind it. Because there, right in the middle of the abdominal cavity, is the seat of divine order. We say that God is order. We call it divine order. And that order is our capacity for adjustment, for balance, for organization, a vital power with which we can move through life. So there, in that center of order, just imagine a dark green, like an olive green light. And as you shine that light as through a flashlight all around the abdominal cavity, imagine there a whole complex of abdominal organs all working in an orderly fashion for your health and well-being. Divine order is not the insertion of some punishing mandate from God, but it is what we bring to life when we are lit up by the Spirit of divine order. So we bless our organ systems that are all harmoniously working in order, and we bless our life experience, that which we are hoping for even right now. We bless it, and we bring forth and call forth from within us the power of divine order to see and to take steps one by one. And now move your attention just a little higher and toward the front to the solar plexus above the navel, because this is the powerful seat of divine wisdom. Shine the yellow light of divine wisdom like the sunlight aglow throughout your whole abdominal area now. Divine wisdom is our capacity to discern, to discriminate in the most positive way, for us to evaluate options, our decision-making power. It's our center of uh-oh or aha. We can trust our gut by virtue of the power of divine wisdom. And it is ours. By the power of divine wisdom, I make choices. The seat of wisdom is called the other brain because of the billions of nerves that connect there, that give us information every day. God is wisdom. I am divine wisdom, living wisely. So by the power of divine order and divine wisdom, I know that I am divine. All that God is my true nature in the moment that I realize it and bring it forth. So for a moment, just sit in the revelation of this truth. I am divine order. I am. No longer will I consider myself helpless in the face of any human condition. I will remind myself that my nature is divine, that all that God is, I am capable of being and expressing into my life. So I now claim the power of divine order. I live my life in an orderly fashion. I choose, through the power of divine wisdom, the way to go. And I experience the blessings of being aligned with all that God is in every moment. I remember my true nature. I remember. And so it is. And so it is, I am divine. So friends, as we close this service together, I just want to express my belief that this is the time in our world. There has never been a time when our prayers and our consciousness have been more needed. There's never been a time when we have been called to do what Jesus said we must do, to be the light of the world. And Jesus didn't say you have to earn the right to do that. He didn't say you have to get good enough. You have to go on a long journey to discover your divine identity. Jesus said, you are divine. And if Jesus said it, are we willing to believe it? Are we willing to believe that we are the sons and the daughters? In other words, we are the inheritors of all that God is. No sin gene for us. It's the God gene. We really are divine. And let's wake up to that, and let's bless the world with this realization in everything we do in this week ahead. Will you make your promise as we go into this final period of the elections, for example, to hold the highest intentions for our country, no matter what party you subscribe to or who you're planning to vote for? Will you lift up the rhetoric and refuse to engage in conversation that diminishes and downplays the worth of any human being? And will you instead speak of the vision that you hold for the good of our country? And will you do that in a clear awareness that it is the divine order that guides you and divine wisdom that shows you the way, the pathway to whatever you speak and think during these coming days? Have a glorious week ahead, and I'm so grateful to be with you today. Thank you.